Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Changing Conversations with SGS as we discuss how we can move towards a better, safer, and more interconnected world. I'm PJ Kwong, and in today's SGS Live, we're going to be talking about companies spending billions on ERP systems, automation, and AI every year. Yet many still ask, why aren't we seeing the returns we expected? We all know that although technology is a powerful tool, it is not the solution on its own. The real value comes from aligning people, processes, and systems. We're going to turn to our experts today to speak to this interesting and timely topic we are calling Unlocking the Full ROI of Technology Investments. A new member of the SGS family is Carpedia International, an implementation-based consulting firm that helps companies turn strategy into measurable results. By working side by side with management, they strengthen and streamline operations and drive EBITDA growth. Without further ado, I am delighted to welcome a couple of experts for this fascinating conversation from this SGS recent acquisition, Carpedia. I'm starting with Beejan Giga, leading in the power sector and who is a director and partner at Carpedia International. Welcome, Beejan.
Hey, PJ, thanks for having me.
Terrific. Okay, next up, I would like to welcome my other guest, JJ Laforet, who's also a director at Carpedia, focusing on the food and beverage value chain. Welcome, JJ.
Hey, PJ, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Terrific. Okay, before we get started, Beejan, like you guys are the experts, right? But I want to know why. What is Carpedia and how are they helping people?
Thanks, PJ. Carpedia is a management consulting firm, and we've been around for 32 odd years now. And we focus ourselves on the operations of the business. And what makes us sort of unique in what our clients tell us is that we work with the leadership teams shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, to actually drive the changes that we talk about through the organization and make them realized into the financials. And I think that second leg of what I just talked about is sort of what makes us unique and why clients like to work with us.
Amazing. Okay, so let's get started in earnest. And Beejan, I'm going to start with you. If we're saying that companies invest in technology to gain visibility, efficiency, and scalability, but too often those initiatives underdeliver, then in your experience, what's the most common reason ERP installations in the power sector fail to deliver on expected ROI? By the way, can you define ERP for us?
Yeah, so that's sort of that enterprise resource planning system or MRP or whatever you want to call it. For us in the power sector or across manufacturing even, companies often look to an ERP system as the solution to a problem. And it's, in our opinion, it's not. It's information that helps us arrive at a solution and it helps us make decisions. But all too often, companies don't take the time to think about the plan, what needs to be planned in an ERP and what the ERP should be looking at. And so you've all heard the term garbage in, garbage out. But really, if you don't spend time up front planning and helping define what the planning parameters are, you run the risk of, through an ERP deployment or any technology deployment, gaining the information that's not going to have the right nutrients to make a good decision. And when you make that subpar decision, the chance is that ROI goes down, or people don't start trusting the system, stop using it, start building things outside the system. And all of a sudden you've came back to the place that you were pre-ERP.
You know, it's hard to say. And by the way, garbage in, garbage out. Boy, where have we heard that expression before, except for everywhere? So, JJ, how about you? How does this show up differently in food and beverage? I mean, where margins are already thin and demand cycles are unpredictable.
I think it's a great question. And I think we're going to start by explaining why we are seeing food and beverage companies begin to invest more and more in technology in the first place. And I'm going to take us back to pre-COVID. As you mentioned, PJ, margins are razor sharp thin. But during COVID, food and beverage companies, especially in the US, actually saw a 75-year record of profit margins. And that was because these companies started pulling on the price lever. And now that we're coming out of COVID, we are seeing regression back to pre-COVID margins. And these shareholders that are used to seeing those 75-year record profit margins during COVID are scratching their heads trying to understand why they're not still seeing that profit margin gain that they were during the COVID era. And so they no longer have that price margin to actually pull anymore, and are therefore investing in technology, hoping to get that same margin improvement or that same return on investment. And what we're doing with these food and beverage companies that are leaning into technology, we are supporting them in that, but we're helping them recalibrate their calculation on what return actually means. And after we finish that recalibration of the return calculation and what return should mean from a technology investment, we then get into the ERP or MRP systems like Beejan was mentioning. And we really help them not only connect the financial world or that volume metric, we really help them understand all the inputs that are required to have not garbage be put into the system, but almost all of the processes that are required of the operating metrics, so that we have good information going into the ERP and we can start harnessing the mix instead of just looking at the volume. And once we understand the mix inputs, we oftentimes get better financial results or better return on our investment through technology.
You know, it's amazing to be talking about all of this. And there's something that I'd like to bring up, and that is AI. It's on everybody's mind. So for both of you, where does AI fit into this picture? Beejan, I'm going to start with you, and then JJ, if you can please follow up.
Of course.
Great question, PJ. I mean, everyone is talking about AI. They're either talking about it because they know what they're talking about, because someone else was talking about it, or they heard about it on a plane, train, or automobile somewhere. I think a lot of the times the conversations I'm having with clients is really focusing on making sure that whatever AI solution that we are even thinking about is actually making its way into the day-to-day operations. It's not parked on some business intelligence team outside of the workflow. It's not hosted somewhere else where we go and leaders or managers can go consult the tool and come back. But being able to find ways to actually embed the AI technology into the workflow helps actually, in my opinion, in two ways. One, it's coaching. No matter what AI tool you're using, it's constantly learning. So the better you can align it and integrate it into what you're doing, the better it actually serves you, because it's learning. It's, whether it be the language model is updating, or it's learning, or the agentic agent is making better decisions. But whatever the case may be, the more you use it and integrate it, the better chance you have at it being better for you. That's one. And I think the second piece is that as a result of trying to really make sure that it's integrated into the workflow, the leader starts to be more comfortable with the technology as well. And it's no longer this outside thing that, I'm going to go check the tool, or I'm going to consult the agent and come back. But they get more confident and they begin to press and ask more of the technology. And ultimately you begin to have this sort of self-enforcing contract that results in actually the use of the tool. And I think those sort of two or three things I talked about, you don't do those things, you park it outside, and then you have this risk where you see a lot in the marketplace where a lot of AI products and AI efforts are landing in just duplicated effort, and they're not capturing the ROI on it.
JJ, what do you think?
I think I agree with Beejan.
Me too.
What I mean by that is AI needs to be looked at as an amplifier, not a solution to a problem. And what Carpedia is really partnering with our clients on that are interested in implementing AI is how are we reshaping our roles and responsibilities to amplify good people, good decision-making, good processes, instead of replacing people. And we oftentimes see managers that we work with go in and start dictating to frontline managers, implement AI. And when those managers take that as a check the box exercise, we often see all of the mechanics that are required to actually leverage and amplify AI in good ways kind of get thrown to the wayside. And those mechanics are, do we have good processes? do we already have good decision making? And do we have a clear understanding of how AI is going to make processes or open up the opportunities or amplify our strategies to improve our processes, improve our decision making? And if we don't have good processes, good data, good decision making behaviors, then AI is not going to amplify our business operating model in a positive way. It's going to detract, and it's going to actually stall behavior. It's going to stall implementation, and it's going to stall sustainable results and that return on investment when investing in AI. That's really not cheap these days.
And if I may, I think it's also making sure we know what problem we're trying to solve. Like I think I've been guilty of this as well in the past. I want to use AI because it's AI and it's the thing. But what are we actually trying to solve? Are we trying to just find a problem for AI to solve? Or are we aligned as a management team, floor team, leadership team, cross-functional team? What is the problem? And do we agree that it's a problem? And that level of alignment starts the roadmap for a positive experience with ERP, AI, software, name it, PJ. Like those,
Yep.
like that alignment is super important.
You know, it's funny. All the cool kids at one time adopted podcasts, and everybody wanted to do a podcast, even if they had nothing to say, because it seemed like all the cool kids were doing podcasts. And in some ways, because people don't really understand AI, at least many of them, the cool kids have adopted AI as well. So if everybody's doing AI, then I should be too, whatever that means. So I think you're right. It's about that alignment. And interestingly, processes. That's sort of my next question. Somebody once said that technology should amplify well-run processes, not make up for broken ones, which is kind of what we're talking about. Beejan, I'd love for you to share an example where operational discipline, not the software itself, determined whether ERP value was realized.
Thanks, PJ. I might twist it slightly on realized, but I have a client, they produce steel, and one of their clients went through a big technology deployment and an ERP deployment. And that ERP deployment triggers for my client the order volume that's required. Fast forward through the implementation, it's into full use, into production, if you will, and the system pushes to my client from their client a no ship order for 2 to 3 weeks. Inventory levels seem to be high in their system, so we don't need anything, so please don't ship us anything this week for the next 3 weeks. And luckily, as a result of actually having deployed good practices and processes within sales, supply chain, and scheduling, the humans involved, the leaders involved went, hold on, 3 weeks? I could buy 5 days, but why is it asking for 3 weeks? Human intervention, called to question the information being promoted from the outside system. One salesperson gets on the phone with a buyer, and the buyer goes, what do you mean 3 weeks? I only needed to hold off 6 days. The client goes and does some investigating. Turns out the system put out a faulty note, and it would have actually choked their production had our client ingested that request at face value. And so there's, for me, is like a super clear example of if you let the system just try to do the work without having the right checks and balances, you can run a big risk in your business. And that choke point on the floor would cost them $250,000 US a day. And there was a 7. So like you were looking at a $1.5 million loss just because you didn't have product there. That's without the labor and everything else that was waiting for the product to be there, all because a system would have done it. So PJ, I think human intervention, management decision-making, leader decision-making can never go away. It's just about having the right prompts at the right place and not falling asleep on the system, not saying, oh, now I got a system, so I don't have to do this. No,
right.
Now that I have a system, I can do what I'm doing better.
People still matter. That's kind of what we're saying at the end of the day. The alignment between people and processes is kind of what we're talking about. So you know what? This is a super interesting topic, and I wanted, just for fun, to get our audience involved in a little trivia. So Here is the question, and you guys can't answer because you probably already know the answer, but okay. If ERP evolved from an earlier MRP, or as we know, material requirements planning in the 1960s, when did ERP start to take hold? There are three possibilities for answers. One is in the 1980s, two, the 1990s, or three, the 2000s. I want the audience to please put their answers in the chat window below, and we're going to take a look at them to see what everybody thinks. So again, here's the question. If ERP evolved from an earlier MRP in the 1960s, when did ERP start to take hold? Three possibilities. One, the 1980s, two, the 1990s, or three, the 2000s. Okay, put your answers in the chat window. The three of us are just going to chat for a little bit while people are sort of considering their answers. Then we're going to take a look at them, I think. So, Beejan, tell me why you're interested in this. And JJ, I'm going to ask you the same thing. ERP, what about it is fascinating for you?
What's fascinating for me, PJ, is the power you can unleash if it's used right.
Okay.
All too often when we walk into environments, clients, leaders no one walks in wanting to do a bad job. You know, PJ, you don't wake up in the morning going, yeah, I really want to be bad today or make a subpar decision. No one really does that. But
Are you sure?
I hope not. But inevitably, I like to think so. Inevitably,
me too.
people walk in, the business happens, things are going on. There's pressure, timelines, competing interests, meetings, too many meetings, not enough meetings, too much information, not enough information, and people make decisions. And they're either good, bad, or somewhere in between. But what I like about, to get to your question about ERPs, is that person gets an opportunity to do their job better, and businesses get to make better decisions. And when we see ERP deployments, or just the use, I don't even just talk about in deployment, but the use of the system, right? Sales, supply chain, operations, they're all working at a common goal of trying to better the customer experience or the client experience. That results in a better profit, that results in a better margin, whatever the KPI that comes out, but people are always talking about how to make the client experience better. And that to me gets me excited when talking about ERPs.
So JJ, back when you were a little kid, what in your background drew you to this area?
I'm a heavy athlete, played some professional sports in my day. And what drew me to Carpedia specifically, I think I was drawn to Carpedia first and then technology second, was our emphasis around working shoulder to shoulder with clients and really having a behavior module as part of our delivery framework. It really allowed me to put myself in a coaching seat. And then I started understanding like what's going to actually amplify businesses and help us win the game, so to speak. And I was able to sit in a coaching position while leveraging tools and getting people to rally around those tools to generate positive outcomes that have, in the food and beverage space, macro impact. And people need food, people need high quality, high integrity food. And that's ultimately why I'm sitting where I am today.
Do you know what? And as it turns out, people need people. You know what? We've got some great responses that have come in. So the answers were going to be 1, the 80s, 2, the 90s, or 3, the 2000s. If you don't know, the correct answer was number 2, the 1990s. Vincent, you were close. What can I say? Well, Basimala was close. Aliaskar also close. Lorelei close. Kate, 1990s. That's the answer. So it's interesting. It feels like it just happened. There we go. Enrique, thank you so much. It turns out that it feels like it was just yesterday. And I think that's the reason why people were responding with the 2000. So to my audience, if you're just joining us, we're talking about unlocking the full ROI of technology investments with my guests, Beejan, Giga, and JJ Laforet from Carpedia. So we're going to get back to our conversation. JJ, how have you seen frontline behaviors make or break the effectiveness of recipe management or production scheduling tools?
I have a mentor. His name's Joe Kidd. I hope he's watching. And during my interview, when I was about to work for him, he asked me, what's the most important thing in a food and beverage manufacturing environment? Safety, quality, or cost? And I was stumped because it was a trick question. And the reality is all three of those things are important. And that interview question kind of gave me insight into what he expected for when I worked for him. And it was understanding that recipe management is the IP to food and beverage companies. It's what makes each food and beverage company different. And there's a lot of pride in that. And so when you think about safety, quality, and cost, it's really aligning 3 different departments and making sure that there's a balanced scorecard built into the technology. So when we get data out of that system, we understand, or the culinary department versus the quality department versus the operations department can at least start understanding the trade-offs that we're making, instead of having the culinary team kind of lead everything and then taste controls all, or have the operations lead from the front and then everything is a cost or efficiency decision. Really making sure that we're having all 3 of those metrics, safety, quality, and cost, built into our system creates balanced scorecards, which in my opinion aligns all of the important departments to produce high quality, high integrity food, so that all of these departments can understand the trade-offs and decisions that we're making, and then we can move the ball up the field.
You know, there is so much information to be had here that I could just talk to you guys all day long. But right now, I have another question for both of you. And Beejan, I'm going to come to you first. How do you prevent a system from dictating behaviors instead of reinforcing the right behaviors? JJ, please jump in after.
Of course.
I think for me, PJ, it's staying close to the operation. All too often we see system deployment technology use installed within a business, and all of a sudden there's a digital way of doing things and then the way we actually do it. And that tends to happen because leaders start to pull away from the floor or rely on the dashboard. They manage their business off this screen. But you know, and you look down at their boots and there's no dust on the boots. Well, when was the last time you went to the floor or to the job site or to whatever the case may be? And the answer is, well, I get everything I need from the screen or the system. I think what needs to happen is to make sure that leaders know they need to stay close to the operation. They need to stay engaged with the floor or where the work gets done. That will prevent the divergence of a digital versus actual, or a design versus actual workflow or reality. And I think when you try to keep that in alignment, that's what really ends up helping leaders push the system and make better decisions, rather than the system push leaders to administrate the process.
JJ, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, Beejan and I are cut from the same cloth. So I agree. I think you really need to flip the relationship. And I think the system, it's the most important thing that the system mirrors the operating model. One of the core delivery pieces that we have within our framework is a management performance system. And what that is how do we connect the operating inputs or the operating mechanics that drive financial outcomes? And when we think about this, we want to make sure that does the system harness our ability to drive margin, or is the system driving more workarounds, extra re-entry, extra changeovers? And if the system is constantly having us do these workarounds or re-entries, what we're often seeing clients do, or the symptom of that, is just over-engineered tech. And we want to help our clients kind of take a step back, simplify and understand the operating metrics that are important to have in that system, so that we understand the levers to push and pull that drive financial outcomes.
You know what? I just knew that our audience was going to be as interested in this topic as I am. And we're getting lots of great comments in our comment section. If you want to leave one, do so in the chat window below. But we're going to take a look and see who has joined us. Lots of great highs from all over the world. As always, we have a wonderful global audience. Look at you, JJ, saying hello back. That's very, very nice. So if people are just joining us, this is an SGS Live where we are changing conversations, and We're talking about ROI on technology investments. And I am with my guest, Beejan Giga and JJ Laforet, both of whom are with SGS's recent acquisition, Carpedia. So don't forget, there's going to be a live Q&A at the end of this interview segment. This whole thing is live. What am I talking about? So feel free to drop questions and comments, as I said, in the chat window below. We're going to try to get to as many of them as possible. And if not, don't worry, somebody will follow up with you after this is completed. So Beejan, I'm back to you for a question. And
Sure.
I know that you often describe your approach as optimize, install, sustain, meaning technology comes after processes and people are aligned. We've been talking a lot about that whole alignment piece. So this sequence seems critical for getting measurable results. Here's my question. Where have you seen the optimization first approach pay off most in your sector?
PJ, I think when you think about the electrical world, or I'll just go manufacturing, if you will. When you think about planning, resource planning and scheduling, those are sort of the two areas to quickly answer your question. But if I was to unpack them, those two areas, or summarized as planning requires a few inputs. And where I think that model that you're talking about really works well is uncovering, being curious, and really challenging the inputs. And I'll give you an example. If you're on a manufacturing line, you're making widgets, and the planning guidelines telling us that this order should fulfill in X hours because we're making 5 widgets an hour. And you digitize that without challenging if you can improve the changeover speed, if you have the right line speed, if you're going to have the right first pass yield. Without challenging those things, you might institutionalize waste or digitize the waste into the planning segment. And so where our model of being curious and doing some information gathering and prototyping and then installing and sustaining, that really works when we pressure test those inputs. And they manifest themselves, to come right back to your question, when you see the best bang for your buck, when a planner can go, I used to be able to get 10 units out in a day. Now I can get 12. How? Well, because we looked at the planning parameters. Then we went back to the floor. I'll stress the floor part. Go back to the floor and actually question, observe, test, work with the management team, the floor team, the line supervisors. Is there a better way to get at that planning parameter? And I'll bring you back a little bit, PJ, to my comment earlier today, where I said no one walks in wanting to do a really bad job. Now you've created technology, a curiosity, and people feel like they're contributing to this success. So now you're creating that self-enforcing contract of what I'm doing at work is satisfying, all from just looking critically at the planning parameters to get improvement in scheduling and planning.
So it's little bit by bit, the little bits add up, and it's making sure you go back to the floor where you get the dust on your boots. Do I have it right?
And a willingness to be curious, PJ.
Yeah, that whole curiosity factor.
We make more mistakes than we do wins always, but I think it's the fail fast, look at something, look at it with some openness. Don't walk in thinking you have all the answers. And if you're open to that, just maybe some of the things will actually come to you from the observation itself.
So, JJ, just in case you thought you were off the hot seat, you're right back on. I want to know, what about in food and beverage? Where did focusing on process discipline before automation make the biggest difference? Can you tell me?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to take you to, I was running a company in Silicon Valley, a food tech company, e-commerce grocery delivery. And I walked into the facility. It was about 250,000 square feet. And the company was, the tech was organized in such a way that made the order pickers do wave picking. And as you were mentioning, I brought the CEO, the other people on the executive team out on the floor, rolled up our sleeves, got dust on our boots, and we saw the order cutoff happen. And then hundreds of people took carts with 10 boxes on them, and they flowed through the entire 250,000 square foot warehouse. And I think the first point to this is, how do you take something in business and relate it to something in just real world life to executives so that they can understand what these people who pick orders every day go through? And I just related it. I was like, why does it feel like all of our order pickers are walking through an IKEA store? The whole point of order picking is to get out of the store quick. And IKEA tried to trap you in the store. And so just by bringing the executive team out to the floor to see that and then relating it to something in the real world, we were able to relate down to the floor, and we were all able to speak that same language. We then went as an executive team and we said, out of this 250,000 square foot warehouse, where is the highest percentage of our picks coming from? And 40% of our picks were coming from 15,000 square feet.
Wow.
And so we said, instead of having all 100 or 150 order pickers flow through this 15,000 square feet, why don't we just have 5 people? And in this area, why don't we get away from wave picking and get into zone picking? And we really focused on installing the process of zone picking, the behaviors of zone picking. And I could probably spend a whole podcast hour talking about the learnings from just that experience. But just focusing on that 15,000 square feet and going process first and getting into zone picking versus wave picking, we are able to bring our variable cost per order from $50 down to $32.
Wow.
And once we established that is the way of working, we tried zone picking in other areas of the warehouse that didn't really work. We then built technology to make sure that we were only zone picking in this area, and we continued to wave pick in the other areas where it made sense. And as I was mentioning, the process and the behavior got us from the $50 to the $32. And then when we put technology in, it made improvement, but it was much smaller. And technology is generally used to get that last 20% of opportunity. And we were able to when we bring our variable cost per order from $32 to $28 by way of integrating good processes, good decision making into our technology.
You know, it's amazing when you talk about it, but it's just the idea that things on paper sometimes look very different than what they are in reality. And that whole getting dust on your boots and walking the floor and sort of seeing how people are doing their jobs, I think that is valuable. So it's going to bring me to another question, this one for both of you, and it's going to be about the executives. So how do you measure ROI in a way that's meaningful for executives like you just did? Are there other examples, but that are also tangible for frontline teams? Beejan, you go first.
Yeah, I think when we talk about ROI, I think we have to frame it up in what's actually being discussed in the boardrooms now. And what I find with my clients is that executives are talking about the return on investment, not just purely financially. So absolutely, technology, we talked a lot about today about how to cash the check and make sure that that's happening. But in a world where talent is more competitive, the need for really good talent is hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
Executives are talking about trying to drive technology improvements to improve even just the way employees interact with the business. Not so necessarily make it easier for employees, but certainly make it digestible and more meaningful. And so, say, like as an example, I'm thinking of a client right now, and they have a system deployment that they're just wrapping up. The system deployment is going well. Adoption is high. There are some training gaps that need to be closed up. But what you're hearing from the supervisory team is that the supervisory team on the floor actually feels like they're able to be with their people now because they have the information at their fingertips rather than spending half their day going to get the info to then tell their people what they're doing wrong. So we've been able to help them, and the ROI has been getting people that have 20, 30 years of experience as line team leads, supervisors, managers, being able to spend more time investing in their people through training and less time trying to keep score and collect the bookkeeping that's required to understand if you're winning or losing. And I think when you talk about and when you frame ROI up like that, you get the opportunity to really supercharge or rocket charge your organization, particularly when you're going to go through heavy growth. So.
You know, I love the fact that really what we're talking about is collaboration, you know, empowering the workforce to do what they need to do and how to do it best, which then, you know, it all flows up and down the ladder. JJ, do you have any comments?
Of course. I just want to echo something that Beejan said. that I firmly believe in the fact that ROI needs to be measured in more ways than just dollars. And what I do with food and beverage companies is really making sure that we understand that as an executive team that we can't look at return on investment and what it means to me and my department or the seat at the table around the executive table that I own. What does this mean to our business? And I'm going to start at on the shop floor. Really, when we install technology, the return on investment to a machine operator or a quality technician is, do we have fewer changeovers? Do we have less reentry? Is my job supported by this technology, or is my job more difficult because these people in boardrooms told me to use this thing? And when we see people on the shop floor rally around the technology, and it's not so much about driving performance improvement, it's are they using the technology, which leads me to more of the executive table. If we're using the technology, we're going to have improved performance or worse performance. Something is going to change, right? And the most important thing is when we're using this technology, we are seeing, are we getting better or are we getting worse? And as an executive team, we want to rally around the idea that it opens up opportunity because we are using the technology and it broadens our strategic horizons, right? And it shifts our strategic roadmap. And to me, that's more valuable to an executive team to understand where our strategy should go versus did we hit, an internal rate of return of the 3% we said we were going to, right? So it's really is the technology opening up our strategic roadmap and kind of dictating our next steps. That only happens if people on the shop floor are using the technology. And that happens by way of less changeovers, less data reentry. And so, yeah, I think that answers your question.
It answers it beautifully. So thank you so much for that. Listen, I have a final question for both of you just before we start our Q&A. And for everybody who wants in on the Q&A, just leave your questions and comments in the chat window below. We're going to try to get to as much as possible. So while every sector is unique, technology adoption struggles can look remarkably similar from power to food to manufacturing. So with that in mind, what's one myth about digital transformation from ERP to AI that you'd like to dispel? JJ, you get to go first this time.
Okay. The biggest myth for me is that technology transforms businesses. I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I believe that people and processes transform businesses. And one of our partners at Carpedia, his name's Andrew, he always says that technology amplifies good or bad people, good or bad decision making. And so I think it's really important that when we're going to install technology, we're recalibrating our return calculation. And in order to calibrate it properly, we're then going to understand that it requires good process first, good people in decision making first, maybe second, and then the technology should be the kicker, or like the cherry on top, because the executive team believes that we have good process and good decision making. Now let's systemize that.
Beejan, what about you?
Yeah, I think the other myth I'd like to dispel is that transformation has a finish line.
Okay. Oh, that's good. I like that.
The idea that a lot of companies treat these digital projects or just in general transformation as a activity, a start and a finish. And it's not. You could have great, we got the 12% throughput increase, 3% scrap decrease. That's not the finish line. If we treat it like the finish line, that day is when results will start to regress because we've achieved it. But transformation needs to be this curiosity journey that continues. Yes, it can take different forms. Yes, it can take different projects or different departments. But one thing we find is through our delivery with clients, continuous improvement and transformation is infectious. And you want to keep that going. You want to keep that stirring in your organization. It's not an end goal. There's always something that can be improved, that can be fine-tuned, whether it's in the management system, whether it's technology. And I think the companies that are continuing to tie it all back, PJ, the companies that are continuing to see ROI are the companies that didn't just stop their transformation journey when their ERP or technology was fully adopted and deployed. Companies that see that continuous ROI are companies that stay curious, that look for help, look for ideas, look for stimulation to their organization to be able to say where next, how long, and test the boundaries of getting better.
And remaining open-minded. That seems to also be key with the curiosity for sure. So for our audience, if you're just joining us, I'm speaking with my SGS Carpedia experts, Beejan, Giga, and JJ Laforet, and we are talking about unlocking the full ROI of technology investments in this edition of Changing Conversations on SGS Live. So we're just about to start our Q&A, and if you want to ask a question, leave it in the chat window below. In the meantime, Beejan and JJ, this first question is for both of you. If you had to give one piece of advice to leaders about to embark on a tech investment journey, let's say, what would it be? Beejan, I'm going to have you go first.
Listen to the organization. I think adoption is critical. And I think when you can drive compliance of systems or technologies or AI or whatever from the top, but if you don't take the time right at the beginning to gain that critical inertia of momentum, interest, and buy-in, it's really hard to drive true change and integration into the business process. People are doing it, PJ, because you told me to do it. And so I would say to leaders, I say this to leaders, I'll continue, is listen to the organization. If you don't think you have the time to spend gathering the information, then just don't go ahead with that project yet. There's a time and a place for it. Don't sleep, don't under prioritize the information gathering and the opinion gathering from the people. It doesn't mean that every single line leader is going to have the perspective they need to influence the entire project delivery, but having that conversation with that line leader is going to give you insight into how you're going to deliver it appropriately. What are one or two things that might go wrong? How to make their role, maybe they're a great change agent. And if you don't do that up front, you're chasing your tail on the backside.
Got it. JJ.
Yeah, I know my one piece of advice is to stop giving technology implementation to one person. Kind of comparing it to sports, you would never give the game plan or the scouting report to just your captain. You would give it to your whole team so everybody understands their role and responsibility. And my biggest piece of advice when installing technology is make it a team sport. A lot of what Beejan was saying is go and talk to the people and make sure that you have subject matter experts that are bringing all of the required information to the table so that you do have that balanced scorecard of the operating inputs getting put into your ERP system or your AI agents or your MRP systems, so that when the financial results show through in your financial statements, we all understand why they are the way they are. And we understand the trade-offs that we made because there's a balanced scorecard of knowledge and subject matter expertise going into the technology.
Wow. Okay. What I'm hearing from both of you is that behavior should drive the system, not the other way around. And for leaders who are listening out there in our audience, this is a reminder to pause before the next upgrade and ask, are our processes and behaviors ready to make this investment work? So Beejan, I want to hear, what area of operations do you think will see the most transformation from technology over the next few years, and what will still come down to people? Because I know, like me, you are a people fan.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a huge opportunity in the power sector around maintenance and reliability. There's so much information. There's so many things moving around. I think focusing on the predictive element of maintenance and reliability is a huge opportunity. I think it's going to come down to people prioritizing it and following through. But I think AI can sort of help guide you to, oh, these are problems, you better go look at them. These are problems, you better go look at them. And then you got to compound that with the discipline that's needed, that, hey, technology is going to make you smarter in this predictive way, but you need to have the discipline of follow-up and make sure you execute properly.
Amazing. Okay, I've got one question, time for one question only, JJ, so you get to wrap things up for us. What's the most overlooked area of the food supply chain where smarter processes or tech could unlock value? A lot of pressure, but
No
bring it home.
pressure at all. This is pretty near and dear to my heart.
Great.
It's really in the logistics and distribution space around food and beverage. We're producing more food than ever before, and food insecurity is at an all-time high. So if we can produce food and people are starving, to me, the opportunity of where we can start leveraging AI technology is making sure that this food we're producing is getting into the right bellies of people. A lot of people in food and beverage get into it because of the need around the world. And I think that's the biggest impact that technology can have in the food and beverage space, is making sure that this oversupply of food is not just ending up in the dumpster or the waste sites and getting into people's bellies.
You know what? There's nothing I like better than food in people's bellies. You know what, guys? I am so sorry. I'm going to have to stop things here because honestly, as I said, I could talk to you all day long, but we are sadly out of time. We're so glad to our audience that we've had you to be here for part of this amazing SGS Live in our Changing Conversation series. I want to thank you, Beejan Giga, and you, JJ Laforet from Carpedia, for joining me. Don't forget that if you wish to learn more, please feel free to comment below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And you can also visit our website at sgs.com or Carpedia's website at carpedia.com. In the meantime, I'm PJ Kwong, and I want to thank you for watching, and bye for now.
Thanks, PJ.
Thanks, PJ. Bye.